Hello guys, so today's topic is facial artery. So let's begin. Facial artery is a branch of external carotid artery. External carotid artery is again a branch of common carotid artery. You remember common carotid artery is divided into external and internal carotid artery. So you see this is the anterior branch of external carotid artery, which is the facial artery. It supplies the face, the neck, the tonsils and the nose. So in introduction there are 2 points. What is it a point of and what all it supplies. Now coming to course and relations. Okay, the facial artery is divided into 2 parts, the cervical part and the facial part. The cervical part is in the neck. The facial part is in the face. The cervical part, it arises in the carotid triangle and it passes beneath the posterior digastric muscle, the stylohyoid muscle, and it passes through the groove at the posterior surface of the submaxillary gland. It curves upwards at near the body of the mandible at the anterior inferior surface of the masseter muscle. It enters the face. So till here it is the cervical part of the facial artery, and after that this is the facial part of the facial artery. Now coming to the course of the facial part of the facial artery, it enters the face at the anterior inferior surface of the angle of the masseter muscle, then it runs upwards obliquely at the side of the nose and it ends at the medial canthus of the eye as the angular artery, which is the terminal part of the facial artery. Okay, now facial artery is always accompanied by the facial vein throughout its course. Okay, now coming to the cervical part of the facial artery, the branches of it and the branches of the facial part of the facial artery. Now the branches of the cervical part of the facial artery. There are 5 branches of the cervical part of the facial artery. There is a mnemonic for this. You can remember it as G MATS. Okay, G is for the glandular artery, which supplies the submaxillary gland. M is for the muscular artery that supplies the muscles of the adjacent region, and A is for the ascending palatine that supplies the soft palate and the palatine glands, and T is for the tonsillar that supplies the palatine tonsil and the root of the tongue, and S is for the submental, the largest of the cervical branches. Remember this, the submental is the largest of the cervical branches. It is given off from the facial artery just when it quits the submaxillary gland. Okay, so the key points, you will remember this as GMATs, and one thing you will have to mention is the largest part of it is the submental artery. Okay, now coming to the facial part of the facial artery, that is again divided into 5 branches. Okay, for this also I have a mnemonic, that is males. Okay, so males, again this is the muscular, which supplies the muscles of the face. A is the angular. This is again an important point in that it is the terminal part of the facial artery that ends at the medial canthus of the eye. It anastomoses with the dorsal nasal branch of the ophthalmic artery, which is again the internal carotid artery. So in the applied anatomy you can give this point, that is, it is the point at the medial canthus of the orbit. There is the point of anastomosis between external carotid artery and the internal carotid artery. Okay, then coming to the A is over, you have the I, that is the inferior labial artery. The inferior labial artery, it supplies the muscles of the lip, the mucous membrane and the labial glands. Superior labial artery, it is the largest and more tortuous than the inferior. It follows the similar course along the edge of the upper lip, and this superior labial is again divided into the septal and the ala branch. The septal supplies the nasal septum and the dorsum of the nose, and the ala supplies the ala of the nose. Then coming to the lateral nasal, which again supplies the ala and the dorsum of the nose. So you are done with the 5 branches of the facial artery, facial part of the facial artery, and 5 branches of the cervical part of the facial artery. Coming to the applied anatomy, in applied anatomy you can mention the anastomosis between external carotid artery and internal carotid artery at the medial angle of the orbit, and the one more thing is the tortuous course. The tortuous course of the facial artery prevents the walls of the artery from stretching during the movements of the muscles of the face and the movements of the mandible. And one more thing is, it is commonly called as the anesthetist artery, which is very important. It can come as MCQ for NEET, because it is the artery which is palpated at the body of the mandible at the angle of masseter muscle. Okay, so you're done with the facial artery. This is the brief description. You have to write in detail for 10 marks and give a brief for 5 marks. Any questions you can